completed a particular course of study, but do they actually have those skills, experience, and personal attributes that they bring to the job? And as we know with a lot of our learners, they have that in spades. They may be extremely talented, detail-oriented, technically gifted, but they may not have the formal education behind them. So that's always a question. Okay, so where do we start? We always start with the beginning, gap analysis and planning. Let's assume that we are starting a new organization or beginning a project. So I'm going to ask you a question. In what situations typically, and don't look at your next slide, this will be cheating. In what situations typically will a need or a gap in either a current job at your workplace or a new job be identified? So when do you typically plan for your human resource needs? Just throw this out. Don't look at the next slide. I'd like to hear from people.
When something happens.
When something happens, good or bad, something happens.
The program grows.
Program grows. I got a bad marker here. Just yell it out.
You getting a funding?
Okay.
And also with the program or business declines. So it's growth.
Yeah. Okay. I hired someone to do X, Y, Z. While they were at the job, they were also doing A, B, C. The project has now ended. They're disappearing and they're taking their X, Y, Z and A, B, Cs with them. How are you going to plan for that gap, right? We're doing a lot with project work. We bring in wonderful new people, but we can't always hold on to them. Other reasons you might plan for HR.
Retirement.
Ah, what a wonderful word that is.
Maternity training.
Cross-training.
Succession planning.
Which was that?
Succession planning.
Excellent. And I don't want to forget maternity here.
That is succession planning, my brewer.
Anything else you typically would stop and go, holy smoke, I think it's time to do some planning. Because often we just let the old HR thing roll out, because who's got time, right?
Small organizations, you just kind of overwork because you're doing multitasking of all the different positions. It just becomes too much workload.
Well, what?
Your client needs change.
Needs change. Okay, I'm going to cut it off right now, or we won't stay within our hour. But you're absolutely right. The next slide lists a number of different circumstances during which we typically plan and are forced to plan. Increased workload. You've already got most of them. The competencies of the job have changed. All right? When a new information system is going to come into your programs over the next number of months to manage data, you're going to have to adjust the competencies accordingly, and the people that perhaps have been doing this all along. A person is retiring, perhaps a performance review has been done, and it's identified that the tasks that a person is doing may not be suitable for them, that they've grown out of love with that job. I know I had a job in 2000 where we took our staff out off-site for a day. We listed all the tasks that as a staff group of 8 we did, every task. Then we listed the competencies necessary for each of those tasks, and then the staff chose their jobs based on their competencies. And you know what? There was very little gap. So for example, we had a person who was taking board minutes, who hated taking board minutes, who was not good at it, did not enjoy it. However, we had another person who had lots of experience in her former job taking minutes, and she would have loved to have been able to do that and also have her finger a bit on the pulse of what was happening in the organization. So we switched up jobs, and it was a really meaningful, productive day. Don't ask me where it went from there. We had a little bit of a disagreement at the board level. After a time study, I know when I was with the Kidney Foundation about 1991, 92, the organization conducted a very in-depth time study. They wanted to know where all their staff was spending their time. So like a lawyer, we had a little pad of paper next to us, and when we put in a half hour on a task, we had to note it. Just the way your lawyer bills you, right? Or on the 15-minute increments sometimes, depending on your lawyer. So we did that, and then, my gosh, was that interesting. We found out how much time we were spending, many of us overlapping duties. So that was a helpful exercise. Other situations, new staff, new management. I think that's supposed to say new management or staff. Increased workload. Notice I copied that twice, increased workload. That was not on purpose. I must have an increased workload. It was in my mind. New demands. The organization's being asked to perform more. Often you're going to be asked as part of a grant proposal to identify what the job description looks like, or the skills of the person who's going to manage or run or work in that program will be. And obviously a new project. You know, we get the great word that that particular project's been approved for us, the funding's there, now we have to start with designing the job. So either current jobs are changing, and that's why we need to plan, or the environment is changing. And that's typically the two main reasons that we pause long enough to go, okay, I guess I better do a job description, or I guess I better do that performance review, right? Okay, using a competency-based approach to planning. And I will go back to our experience of taking our staff off-site in 2000 and doing what we did. If you're designing a job, this is the creative part. On a list the key tasks, duties, and responsibilities of the job. Don't go to competencies yet. Think about the functions you're going to expect this person to perform. Then you go to your list and you say, I got a competencies list here. It's great to match up the tasks on one side of the paper and the competencies necessary to perform those tasks on another one. So I don't think we'll have time to do this exercise, but this is an exercise you can take back to your organization to do. And it is the second last piece of paper at the end. This is what I would have you do if we had another hour and a half together, or two, is look at the list of tasks below. This happens to be for a development manager. I would list those tasks on the left-hand side, and in a column to the right, list all the competencies. Flipping back and forth between my competency list and filling in those blanks. Sometimes when we're hiring, we jump and put too much emphasis on the task, as opposed to looking at the underlying competencies that are necessary to perform that task. So that's why it's a little different than the more traditional approach. Now I must tell you, when I started teaching the HR and volunteer management class at the college 10 years ago, I used to find all kinds of examples of poorly written job descriptions and poorly written job ads because everyone was focusing on the task. Need to. You know, manage this, do that, but not the underlying skills, attributes, and experience that they needed to do those tasks. So this is, but now I have trouble finding those bad examples. Because and we're going to look at an ad in a second, you'll see how there's now usually a balance between here the tasks inherent in the job and the qualifications, experience, attributes, competencies necessary to do the work. Okay? Makes sense? So that is a great exercise for you to do somewhere, some other day. Once you have that, and I want you to sort of think in your head, let's keep it simple and think about perhaps 5 tasks. Think about a job right now. If you had all the money in the world and you wanted to hire someone, think in your head about the 5 key tasks you'd have that person do, and as a result, maybe 5 key competencies they would need to do that job. And let's do that on a piece of paper. This, so we'll all be thinking and looking at the same thing. I'll do it over here. Let's look at the example, actually, of the development manager. You've already got the task list here, but we don't have to do that. Just throw out to me, looking back and forth between this list and your competency list, what do you think some of the main competencies might be for this individual? Just throw them out.
Organizing.
Strong organizational abilities.
Communication.
Strong communication skills. Whether you call them ability, skills, experience, we are looking at those inherent competencies within the task. What else? Job ideas. Pardon me?
Collaborate.
Collaborate. Not something that you can necessarily teach someone. Overseeing. The ability to manage people and tasks. Okay, my writing's disappearing here. That's okay. What else? This is a very complex position.
Comfort with details.
Detail-oriented. You got it.
Right.
Analyze. Right. Now you see we are getting into the verbs and the tasks, but it's about the ability to write or having creative attributes.
Prioritizing.
Ability to prioritize.
And with that ability to evaluate also.
So you're looking at the tasks and then looking at the competencies that are embedded in those tasks. And I know this sounds a little bit like literacy, right? You're looking at the tasks that people may need to do in their lives and saying, then what kind of support, what kind of skills do they need? Now, I haven't seen the Ontario Adult Literacy curriculum, but it sounds to me like it could be a little bit of the reverse of this, I'm hearing, that it's going to be focusing on the task, not the skill. So we'll see where that goes. But that may be another thing I need to highlight right now is the term competency is used in the OALC, but in a totally different meaning. I'm coming at it from an HR perspective. Okay? Important to note because as we are exposed to more information about the OALC, Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum, we're going to see this term of competencies come up again and again. So yes, so that's your first step. Okay, so then we have to create a job description using the competencies as well as the tasks. That's still an important part. Let's look at the elements of a typical job description. And I know in some organizations, there is no job description. We just bring them in and put them to work. Might be a good time to pause and do a job description. Okay, so this is not the be-all, end-all list of elements of a job description. These happen to be, as I looked at the ones I use and the ones I've taught with and the ones that you'll see online, this is typically what is listed. Job title, the organization, the date, critical piece, right? Is this the same job description from 1987, or is this the one that we've been working on as a committee? A little helpful hint there. On any document you work on, put a date on it. It's really easy to get lost with all the paper all of us manage all the time. The responsibilities and the duties, still extremely important, but the competencies that then relate to those responsibilities. Who they report to, who they work with, if there's a salary range, if there's an hourly range, what the time schedule may be for that job. Is there a classification from a permanent employee to perhaps an on-call contract worker? The terms, this is a 2-year term, this is a 6-month term. The benefits, And I'm talking volunteers here too. Ideally, wouldn't it be nice if we had great job descriptions for all of our volunteers?